today, and actually also for being with us from the very beginning of these initiatives. Very welcome, Magnus, and we are very pleased that we will be able to listen your new book, one of your new book, because actually I received a few days ago an announcement of another book forthcoming by you that looks very extremely interesting. Magnus is, in fact, an author of a large number of an important publication that includes books, edited volumes, special issue, peer reviews, article. The Social Life of Unsustainable Mass Consumption is actually a book that was published probably not more than 6 months ago or something like that. We immediately captured Magnus in this series to present the book probably the day after it was announced for publication. The new book, I don't know if you will spend some words also about it, because I thought it was very, when I received it, and I went also to the webpage of this forthcoming book that is titled Environmental Sociology and Social Transformation, Key Issues. I went and I scrolled the outline, and I think that this will be, again, another very provocative and interesting book. It is actually organizing sections that are crisis, causes, distribution, understanding, barrier, and transformation on environmental issue. So these are the section of the book with chapter inside. So it sounds very tiny, a very tiny contribution. Magnus is also, I would like to underline this, one of the 3 editors of the Oxford Handbook of Political Consumerism. There was a massive work they did, Magnus, with his colleagues, because it was, I believe, a big effort that for all of us, because it's an important piece of work, summarizing a lot of years of debate. From this title, you can we know and you can understand that Magnus is cross-cutting. Magnus' research is cross-cutting several issues, debating in environmental sociology, sociology of consumption, political sociology. His interests include politics, representation, consumption, action, and transformative learning. Under this label, transformative learning, there are a lot of very interesting articles that he wrote with other colleagues that I suggest you to look up. This was my brief presentation. Really thank you for being here, and I leave you the floor. And I think that it will be a very good way, beautiful way to end these year seminars from our part, and we are looking forward to listen to you and to open up the debate after your presentation. Thank you, Magnus.
Well, thank you, Francesca, both for inviting to this and for this now very nice presentation of me that you just gave us. Do you hear me well?
Yes. Perfect.
And nice also that you that we got some extra promotion of the just soon coming book, which actually just now came to my as a physical copy to my co-author Rolf Lidskog. So he's sending me SMS right now, but I cannot read them because I'm going to talk about the previous book which came last year. So I will share a screen. And please remind me if I'm talking too much, too long, because there is should be, but I hope it will be 45 minutes, and that's my aim. Do you see this the slide? You see
yes.
the first? Yes.
You see perfectly.
So I started with a picture of 4 Earths, because to symbolize the ecological footprints of people living in a country like Sweden, like myself, that we have unsustainable lifestyles. So this has been an inspiration to write this book, that we need to fundamentally change lifestyles, but there are difficulties, to say the least. So that was has been an inspiration to write the book. which I wrote slowly several years by reading and researching, and I want to synthesize my understandings of the situation in this book, The Social Life of Unsustainable Mass Consumption. So I will summarize basically what I write in the book, this seminar. So it is, as Francesco already told, it is based on the sociology of consumption theory, both classic, such, and contemporary. I want to build on the insights from many theories that has been written the last century or even more. And also tie in a lot of the different research in consumption studies and environmental social science, where it fits into the argument. And some own empirical research, mostly qualitative research on consumption reducers. But I treat my own research more like a part of the literature. So it's most of it is present in the last chapter. So it's more kind of a book based on theory and previous and research. I use consumerism as an umbrella term in the book, which I consider as a kind of mindset, one could say, when consumption is seen as the default tool to solve problems and satisfy needs, wants, and desires. So whenever we want something or feel a need something, we run to the market and buy something. I mean, we could satisfy needs and wants in many other ways, but in our culture, we are kind of run to the market. So that is consumerism. Mass consumption, I see as what we have, the whole context of the infrastructure, so to say, of opportunities, and which is also is a consequence of consumerism. I use the word social life to kind of capture the social dimension of it, what I want to describe and analyze in the book. Here is a kind of map of the arguments in the book. What is driving unsustainable mass consumption? And my umbrella term is consumerism. But of course, it's not just one, it is lots of drivers behind, and many of them appear on the macro level, the societal level. So I have in the introductory chapter a discussion about these macro level drivers, factors like capitalism, which is wired towards economic growth and capital accumulation, profit, industrial technological revolutions, which makes it possible for mass production and mass consumption. Social stratification, the inequalities and distinctions on a structural level all around the world. We also have a economic geography and infrastructure with possibilities of global supply chains, for example. And in many countries, politics and ideology of growth since many decades back, which kind of support arguments for this mass production and mass consumption. And the culture of consumerism, which says that we should seek happiness through consumption. That's the broad message, advertisement, etc., etc. So I describe this, the book is more towards the micro meso level, I would say, the social life of the individual, which I call it. But I remind all the time that this contextual societal macro is there and forcefully affects what's going on in the social life. But I have an argument that we cannot only look at the macro factors. We need also to take into account why we reproduce this pattern of unsustainable mass consumption, consumerism. It's part of ourselves in everyday life. And that is what I spend most space in the book to elaborate on by using this kind of sources that I explained. So these are the different chapters: social relations, social comparisons in stratified social life, the temporal dimension, spatial dimension, and the cognitive dimension. I will go and talk a bit each of these chapters, briefly summarizing them. So what you find there on the social life. First, I have a chapter on social relations, and I mean intimate relations, you know, love relationships and family relationships, friends, and all that. I talk about everyday rituals and consumerism, how these are linked. And yeah, I focus on things like gift giving, shopping, vacations, dinners, these kind of rituals that we do to kind of bond with each other, socialize. And I rely on one theory. I rely on many theories, but particularly on one, which works well as an overall frame for the chapter. So it's Randall Collins' theory of interaction ritual chains, which is based on, in turn, a lot of theories like Emile Durkheim and Erving Goffman and classic sociological insights. He explains, Randall Collins, that we seek rituals, we want to be part of rituals in everyday life. And he sees that the ritual consists of when we come together in a group, feel included, and there are barriers to outsiders, and we focus attention on something, and then express a shared mood on that something. It's not only kind of formal rituals that we go to a church or celebrate something, but there can be also like a conversation, a dinner, having a meeting. There are all sorts of rituals we have in everyday social life. And many of these rituals, they kind of lead to what Durkheim would say, collective effervescence. It's a kind of electricity. We feel we are together, we are engaged, do something together. Not every ritual feels good, but many of them do. So they lead to group solidarity, that we feel belonging, to emotional energy within individuals. We create symbols to reflect these rituals. We create standards, norms to reflect them. And because we feel we kind of want to have this positive and high emotional energy, we return to them. So we repeat the rituals, we go back to them. And I found that this theory can very nicely be tied to insights about what we are doing as consumers and consumption. So I use this idea to tie in these kind of insights. For example, consumption can be what we focus on in a ritual, both before we buy something or when we consume something and after. Like a vacation, for example, that is something the family can dream about before, plan together. It can create enthusiasm, and then we are there, and then we remember the vacation afterwards. So this kind of activity builds relationship. Think of a love relationship, for example. You just have to go on vacation and be together, etc. Or friends, what they do together. So consumption acts and objects, they then cause social bonds and emotional energy within them. And we create consumer symbols, brands, sports, cars, for example, which will connect to particular groups, perhaps, etc. And even consumption can also be not just what we focus attention on, but maybe we want to just meet, and the meeting is a ritual, but we need to have a lot of backstage or around us, consumer items, going to a cafe to have a meeting, or all these things. So yeah, in this chapter I go on and for example, use this kind of theory to discuss the topic. I should say also that in all chapters I use several theories, so I have a very plural approach to this topic, to theorizing. I don't think we should have one theory. I think we should have many theories to understand the phenomenon. So that's my approach. A bit eclectic perhaps, but I think that is better than to just use one theory in one book. The same goes for my view on methodologies. Yeah, bring them all in, qualitative, quantitative, experiments, etc. So I think it's funnier to read a field and use all the different methods that exist, historical, contemporary, etc. Next chapter is about social comparison and consumerism in stratified social life. That is the title, I guess, I think of the chapter. And I do started with discussing themes like luxury consumption, the role of social media and brands. But the key concepts in the chapter are this one: identity, status and distinction, and inequality. So let me say something briefly about each of these, how they link to consumerism. Yeah, first, in the introduction, I talk about social comparison, how we are so our human tendency to compare ourselves with others. We do that. And that has been, of course, a classic insight from social psychology. And it seems to be a general driver of consumerism. We don't want to have less than others, preferably more, better, but at least not worse. More expensive, but at least not cheaper. So that is kind of general. And the social stratification or distinctions in various ways add fuel to this driver, one could say. But identity, when you look at how identity can link to consumerism, there can be several different mechanisms here involved, or drivers. As you see in this figure, for example, the role of the extended self. That's a concept from Russell Belk, which I think is interesting, that we try to kind of extend ourselves through objects that we buy and possess, cars or whatever it is, a house. They kind of feel like they are a part of our bodies, so to say. So it's one interesting theory here about the connection between identity and consumerism. Or the multiple selves, that if you have many selves, perhaps I want to be one self at job, but another self at the party, then we need also a lot of items, objects to appear in different ways in the different social situations. We want to fit in, but also appearing unique. I mean, there are that these kind of appearing unique might mean that we need to more things to actually have the opportunity to do that, for example. The role about unattainable ideals and incomplete identities is, I think, important. And I have a figure here in the book, which is very much based on a social psychologist called Helga Dittmar, who has studied these things in many whole career almost, both these things. So I wanted to refer to her work. And I think what the important insight here from social psychology is how the gap between, in the circle to the left here, you as you perceive yourself now compared with the person that you want to be. So Serge studied that a lot. And we build on the cultural world, the symbolic resources that are available. But usually they are not enough. The ideals that we internalize are often unattainable, so to say. We seek the perfect body, we seek material good, and we think there are people out there, successful peers, that we try to imitate. But we run into a wall all the time here. So the point here is that it's been a bit sad game, because we never reached the one that you want to be. And Helga Dittmar has an argument, of course, that we can work on the cultural level to try to be more satisfied with who we are. So it is not deterministic, but it is common, she find in the studies. particularly maybe among younger generations. So these are examples of theories that I go in this section. I talk about status, and then I think many are familiar with classic work from Thorstein Veblen, Conspicuous Consumption, Pierre Bourdieu, Distinction, and Cultural Capital. An interesting later theory is about multicultural capital. That is not just cultural capital in the Bourdieu sense that we want to have very, very good taste of wine, etc., like that. But here it is more that we have a tendency that it should be experienced of everything. We should have been in that country and in that country and try that to build the multicultural capital. And of course, that means a lot of consumption. So it's a driver behind consumerism if we want to develop our multicultural capital, be an experienced citizen. And the theories here are involved, discusses how this create the game upwards, towards more spending, consuming more all the time. Inequality, I mean, income inequality is important, of course. So I discussed that in the section. I have, for example, some pages about very rich, super rich. The problem is not only them, for example, that they causes climate footprints, but the problem is that they also cause problems for all segments of the population, because they create role models that others should imitate, inflame desires. They create a culture of wastefulness. They create a sense of relative poverty, which is not necessarily absolute poverty, that you don't have food for the day or I mean somewhere to live, but rather that you feel you are poor in relation to others. So higher inequalities means also a risk for higher relative poverty. And what do you feel as soon as you get something, opportunities for buying something, then you run to the shops to kind of compensate for that feelings of relative poverty. There are lots of studies actually that are confirming this relationship between feelings of relative poverty and materialist and consumerist orientation. So I rely on these in the argument here in the chapter. Collective dilemmas is important also. When you feel it's unfair, and then it's less incentives to contribute to a collective problem, like our unsustainable lifestyles. Here is another model in the book which is saying the same things. Increased inequality gap in society community lead to experience of relative poverty and perception of negative social judgment, which means that you are seeking compensation in materialist goals and status and consumption. Next chapter deals with the temporal dimension. So it's called the temporalities of mass consumption in social life. So the time is the topic here, and experience of hurriedness. I rely on this chapter as a starting frame, theoretical frame on Hartmut Rosa's theory of social acceleration, which I thought fit to the picture, although his theory can also be, of course, criticized a bit to be too deterministic. But nonetheless, I think it's a useful starting point in the chapter. He discusses technological acceleration. I mean that we can do things faster. Acceleration of social change. I mean, it could be changing partners or jobs more frequently. Acceleration of pace of life, that it feels like everything is going faster. And there is external drivers here, the economic motor, like capitalism, the socio-structural motor, like division of labor, the cultural motor. And what I do here is to have two large sections in this chapter. One where I discuss the kind of the structure where we have work time and this, which is separate to leisure time in our modernity. And the cultural motor is related to the celebration of novelty. That has been a theme, important theme in sociology of consumption, if you know about Colin Campbell and Zygmunt Bauman, another sociologist, that they discussed the topic of novelty, Tim Jackson. So saying something about the work, how the separation of work leisure connects to consumerism via several drivers here. Yeah, one, what do we do in leisure? Well, of course, then it's time to consuming. Then we associate leisure with consumption a lot. It is a retreat, a reward for the sacrificed time when we do work. The situation that we have in wealthy countries with a lot of time working, work rich, but many people feel they don't have time to do things. They feel time poor. That means a demand for solutions to deal with these feelings of time scarcity. How do you solve that? Of course, by buying services, for example, people that helping you with the time issues, stuff that make you think that you can deal with everyday life more smoothly. Like, look, yeah, everyone can look around in one's own house and see a lot of devices that are meant for saving time. However, what, for example, theories in social practice theory and the research in that shows a lot that this is not really saving time, because you get more goods, more things, then it's kind of issues of synchronization, etc., which makes it, you don't really save time. So it's a spiral of you solve the issue with superficial ways, which will rather add to new time pressures. So it's the consumerist way to solve time scarcity, precedes time scarcity. It doesn't really work. Another topic is the future leisure. So if you have work a lot, earn a lot of money, but don't have time to do things with your money, what do? Of course, you could save money, but there are research showing how you rather buy things and store them because you think you can use the items in the future. A lot of equipment for your future leisure, like sports equipment, or it can be music instrument, or it could be an extra house, etc. Of course, this is for the segments of the population that can afford. The other part of the chapter is this ideology of that everything new is the best one, the chase for novel things, which I discuss. Also the cycle of desire, which again is based on work by Russell Belk. Also, Hartmut Rosa has a lot of interesting things to say here about the fear of missing out, for example. So I think it's quite interesting how they write about this cycle of desire and the short-lived satisfaction. So we even when we have buy something and enjoyed it for a short time, then we quickly become kind of empty in mind, and even we desire the desire. So we desire the stage when we are running and trying to find the goods. Yeah, maybe fashion can be understood in this way. So an interesting theory about that. What I do in the conclusion is I like these simple models, and yeah, the feeling of time pressure adds to consumerism, but the consumerism also adds to time pressure, because if we get more stuff to take care of, then we feel time pressure. So it's a vicious circle in a way. I end this chapter by saying something about the loss of future, when consumption is very much in and for the present. We are here now when we consume, but don't think so much or invest so much for the future. I thought that quote from Greta fitted here. just read it. We have everything we could ever wish for, and yet now we have nothing. Now we probably don't even have a future anymore, because that future was so that a small number of people could make unimaginable amounts of money. It was stolen from us every time you said that the sky was the limit and that you only live once. I thought about that, Greta's stolen future, when in relation to the presentness of in this chapter. The fourth chapter here of 5 is about sides of consumption. So now it's not the temporal dimension in focus, but the spatial dimension of drivers. And I divided up the thing in 3 sections, one on the home and one on the mall, where we buy things in the supermarkets and like that, and the internet. And reading about literature on housing, homes and consumers was very interesting, but of course I was very surprised of how many things were involved here when you look at it from a spatial perspective. So it was fascinating to write this chapter. Well, it's of course where children are socialized into our social life and develop identities. I mean, the home context is very important for that, of course. You can nowadays consume a lot from home, consuming culture. There are many both conspicuous and inconspicuous aspects of consumption. I mean, the latter is invisible consumption, whereas conspicuous consumption is tied to status. And the social practice theory is very clever in finding C's here. Elizabeth Shaw and other theorists discuss how our demand for comfort, cleanliness, convenience, coherence, and being nowadays also being connected with the outside worlds, how they cross, particularly inconspicuous drivers here. Lot of energy, a lot of water, a lot of chemicals, etc., connected to these, how it works in the home context. Nowadays, we are working from home. We can maybe reduce transport and be good in that way in terms of less climate impact, but we need more stuff, furniture, electronics, etc. So, and I go through some literature about the tendency to expand homes, at least in some countries. There has been such trends, and the fact that we need more space, both for privacy, members in the families. They need private space and they need space for social interaction. So we need a lot of space in the homes. We use possibilities to borrow money, not just to expand the home, but actually to buy items for the home, or even to afford vacations and like that. Path-dependent consumption. Once we have invested in a home, it's difficult to change because we already are locked into the technical structures, etc. And we want to celebrate our happy family life through our dreams connected to the home. This is just one of the topics here. There's a vicious circle here between demand for stuff and demand for space. If we buy more stuff, we need more space. But if we have more space, we might also need, we cannot be empty space. We need to have more stuff to fill the space. The city mall is another spatial context where, of course, consumerism is boosted, obviously. It's associated with entertainment, abundance, social interaction. The internet and social media, obviously, it makes it possible to be there all the time, buying, social interaction, social comparison. The final chapter before the conclusion is about the cognitive dimension, and the chapter is called The Social Stock of Not Knowing, in parentheses, Normalization and Ignorance of Unsustainable Mass Consumption. I like the picture here of when you're driving car into a fog. You don't know where to end, and it is like our knowledge about our lifestyles. We just go on, and we don't know when we hit the wall, really. So, normalization is an important concept here, which I use. How our unsustainable mass consumption is normalized. We don't question it. We think it's so, of course, this is what everyone else does. It's not strange. Although historically, and if we look at the facts, it's really strange because it's unsustainable and we cannot continue. However, we don't question it because of many different ways. So I collect some sub-drivers here, for example. It's inscribed in the social practices. We imitate, we just do what everyone else does, we imitate. It's part of our body knowledge. We have already learned it from earlier life. We cannot see, because it's so normal, we cannot see there are alternatives. And because it's normal, it's also a norm. We should be shameful if we don't consume as much or in the same way as most groups in society. So it's a very powerful hidden tacit driver, this normalization. Ignorance, we don't just know how bad it is to continue consuming the levels with us or the types of products. That has to do also with structural issues, like we are, for example, in the west, northwest of the world, for example, there are a lot of distances and complexity involved to get the stuff to our homes. It's produced elsewhere in the world, but so we don't see all the consequences. Division of labor, we are very strong expertise in historically we have a strong expertise in very narrow area, so we just don't know about the other things that we are not experts on. I discussed these topics also in relation to concepts like fetishes and the one-dimensional thinking, which comes from a critical theory. Herbert Marcuse, for example, has this, that we just, are kind of blind. The last chapter this book is very pessimistic, as you hear. I have some optimistics to say also, but although I think we need this remind about this pessimistic. And here I continue with this pessimistic, because what we do when we start to reflect is not necessarily that we try to change lifestyle or try to change society. We might just try to, defend, I know there is some problem of consumerism and our way of lives, but then there can be a set of arguments here. I have 9 here, how we defend the way we are living. Small agent, it doesn't really make any difference if I change my lifestyle, and there are other people that are more responsible, the super rich, for example, so don't bother about me. Or the caring argument. I know we are having an unsustainable lifestyle and consume too much, but I cannot be more radical than the others because my kids will be bullied. So it's care for social relations, so to say, makes you continue. Social comparison. Well, others consume more, so why cannot I? Postponing. Well, I'm locked into the circumstances now, but maybe I can change 10 years from now. Then I will change my lifestyle. Entitled. I deserve all of this consumption because I have sacrificed so much time. I'm burned out. I am retired. I have worked all my life. Why shouldn't I have the right to have my lifestyle? Just in case. Well, what if something happens? I need to have all this stuff just if something bad happened and I need a stock of things. This is pretty similar to the first argument, but the idea is that, if I just buy this one, there is no big harm, actually. It's small effect. Or maybe there is an think you're an exaggerated agency, kind of exaggerate your own role in doing small actions. So you might say that I do my bit, I am a green consumerist, I compensate for the bad things I'm doing, so to say. Or maybe, it is going to hell, so I should continue as long as I can, like traveling to the particular area as long as I still can do that. And I'm not saying this to blame the reader. So it's more like, and I also use myself as an author, these arguments, despite I am aware of the unsustainable. So I want to be careful when I come with these justifications. But I think sociologically, empirically, we are all, I think, justifying and defending our unsustainable lifestyles. So I think it's fair to say that. Then I continue in the last chapter to kind of, okay, what is the opening here? I think an important opening to change on the individual level, on societal level, is to recognize the flaws. Not just that consumerism is contributing to worsening conditions, like the ecological footprints and all of that, but also it cannot even deliver on its promises. There are lots of data that show that we are not getting more happy or having a better quality of life just because we are consuming more. Of course, up to a certain level, no one wants to be poor. Then if you are poor, really poor, or I mean, up to a certain point, more consumption is of course necessary. But above that point, there are lots of data that show that, okay, it's not more of consumption or consumerism that adds more satisfaction of life. So it's meaningless in a way, consumerism, in the wealthy context of the world. That is an opening, I think, to reflect. And I discussed 3 flaws based on that, which is, it's not exhaustive, of course. There can be other flaws, but consumer is a zero negative sum game. I mean, it's more like we compare and compete about status, but I mean, that is a zero sum game. On the aggregate level, we don't get happier with that game. Restless insatiability, that has to do with restlessness, the temporal dimension that I talked about earlier, or the cluttered experience, a feeling of too muchness, which maybe connects to the spatial dimension a bit. This is my only optimistic slide. Then I will stop. I do rely in this last chapter on movements and people that actually are changing their lives, voluntary simplifiers or consumption reducers. And I have in my research focusing on them, on their transformative learning, which is a demanding process. An optimistic note here is that although it's voluntary lifestyle change, many of them expresses quality of life. So what they are doing is not, when they drastically reduce consumption, it's not that they get unhappy, it's rather the opposite. So that message, I think, is important. But what I do is that I talk about it's both structure, culture, and people. So it's important with these dynamics between micro and micro and macro. I discuss transformative learning. I discuss the role of social influence, the battle between frontrunners, adapters, and resistors. And I don't mean that there are some people that are only frontrunners and some people that are only resisting change. I think resisting is part of everyone. That was I talked about defensive strategies. And front running can also be part of anyone. So it depends also on what we are talking about. If it's going vegan, for example, we have front runners there and resistors there, and the same person can be don't want to stop flying, for example. But so I mean, I think it's wise to not label people, some people as front-runners and other people as denialists, etc. But all of these can exist in one individual. And the reorganizing society, there are a lot of measures that needs to be taken on the structural level, and I think we can call it reorganizing society, because the sustainable society will not look like our society. It will be drastically changed. But I think the important here is to see entry points to this, how societal change can happen, and people need to be involved. So it's not either a structural issue, either or, it's both structure and people. I think that, yes, that was the last slide. So I stop sharing.
Thank you very much, Magnus. It was a very wonderful, actually, introduction to summary of your book. I already see. I see a lot of compliments from many people, not already a question. But I think that is good if we open the floor for questions, so we can discuss with Magnus. I just would like to say that I really appreciated the fact that you are using a lot of theory and a lot of methodologies. I completely with you with this choice, and I think that the book is a very in-depth journey toward, from more consolidated theory to more new ones, analyzing consumption. So I think that I hope next year my student will appreciate, because it was a long time that I was looking for a new book analyzing exactly why we are consuming so much. I mean, what are the different drivers that push us to consume so much? Although we are increasingly aware of the fact that the many problems we are facing, not just environmental problem, but also social problem, are actually directly linked with our way of living and consuming and producing. So I have some questions, as many of you probably have, but I would like to give the floor before to you. Hello, Elizabeth. I saw a lot of friends in this in this virtual room today. Nice to see you, Elizabeth. Please, would you like to discuss with Marcus? Go ahead.
Yes, thanks so much for organizing. It's great to see you. And Magnus, I love this book, and I'm looking forward to teaching it the next time I teach my relevant course. So thank you. My question for you is about how much scaling back and minimalism seems to be enough. So in that in the little hopeful bit at the end in the last chapter, where you talk about the influencers and the voluntary simplification movement, and how it actually increases satisfaction and doesn't decrease it. So it's both moving individuals in the right direction of joy and moving society in the right direction of sustainable consumption. Do you have some ideas about the threshold of how much is enough? If I go a year without buying anything, is that enough? If I downsize to a studio apartment, is that enough? Are there any indicators of thresholds of where it gets us environmentally and also where it gets us personally, and how far we have to go to be influential of the people in our lives or inspiring? Does it have to be drastic? Or more about that would be interesting to me if you want to talk about it. And I have other questions too, but I'll cede the floor.
Yeah, it's a difficult to. By the way, hello, thank you for the comment. It's a very interesting and relevant question. It's very hard to answer. When I remember it's difficult to say where they bump into the threshold, because it's so the narratives I get from people are both similar but also very different. So they start in different corners. Some start as trying to eat less meat and then realize, oh, I can do more things. This was a nice experiment. I can start to reflect upon mobility, or I may join a group which discuss these things. So some are very social and some are very individual, and some focus on that, and others focus on that. But the similarity is that one thing leads to another. Many describe that. So it's a stepwise process, but it can be very different for different individuals. So it's very hard to say. I think the importance is to, discuss this more on what is common is that among those is captured well by the concept of transformative learning, for example. But that process towards that learning, towards just more radical learning, is quite different. For some, it takes, it takes quickly. They just realize, this is, and for others, they describe the process as like 3-4 decades until they come to a realization that this has been, they have thought about the environment and consumption for lots of years, and then suddenly, something dramatic happens in their own life. So my answer is that it's difficult to say a particular threshold and a particular pathway, because they are very varied. There are very different narratives, but there are some key issues involved. And I think this role of social influence, as I mentioned, and the transformative learning, the experience of, it's not so hard after all, or it is hard, but not, it works. And the feelings of quality of life, these are kind of general. And I think in teaching, for example, I think it's important to mention these commonalities between the different narratives, I guess.
Yes, Gael?
Hi, thank you very much for the presentation. I think it was really insightful, and I like how you gave an overview of all the drivers of mass consumption and explain it through the frame of consumerism. And because you focus so much on the drivers of consumerism and mass consumption, I was wondering if you had also thought about the reverse, meaning barriers to those types of consumption behavior. I'm thinking, for instance, about shaming and how things like taking the plane, for instance, in Europe, have become something that lots of people consider, really anti-environmental. And I know personally some people who are just stopping taking the plane. And that type of, kind of new or changes in consumer culture, I was wondering if you're starting to see an effect on the behavior and mass consumption behaviors.
Can I ask, the role of shaming in flying, for example, you mean that as an example of continuing, you mean or I wasn't following exactly that.
Sorry, sorry if I wasn't clear. I mean that, mechanisms that are preventing or constituting barriers to consumerism, such as, for instance, how some people are shaming behaviors like taking the plane. Do you think it's affecting other people's behavior?
About the role of shaming, first role I can answer about the analytical. I use the word driver in there, and I have a little argument there. A similar word would be mechanisms, but I chose to use driver because I think it might be easier to use that for students, for example, rather than although I think it drives in similar term as causal mechanism, for example. So that's what I mean is that it can be driver that can be from structure, and it can be from more from agency, etc. Driver behind phenomena. And the barrier could be, it could be opposite. It can be counter drivers, for example, that So one driver can be competed by a counter driver. So that could be. So I don't use the word barrier or in that sense, but I mean, so it's drivers that can go in different directions. That's the vocabulary I use. But certainly there are barriers, both drivers that explain consumerism, but they can be drivers that are part of the change process. Shaming potentially, but I mean, I have different problems with that the shaming. But empirically, I don't know your answer if that is actually contributing. It's difficult to assess. But shaming is in a way always involved, has always been involved in consumption, I would say, and in ethical, political aspects of consumption, although it has been part of the public debate when it comes to flying now, not least from Sweden. But I mean, shaming is part of the norms. If you don't follow a norm, shame on you. So, but it's never, I mean, so it's nothing new actually. So, and in a way, when people are front runners, for example, when they suggest that this is the sustainable lifestyle that we should, implicitly there is perhaps shaming going on. But as PR strategy to make it as a way to promote change, I'm not sure if that should be a strategy. I'm not sure if I answered your questions, but
yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Okay.
I think that there is Deja, who, if I well understand, that the comments, the repeated comments ask the role of government. I mean, if government and regulation don't change, what can we do? If I well understood, interpret I don't know if Deja wants to open the microphone and anyway, please on the chat.
Okay, there are chats. Maybe I can check also.
Yes, I interpreted good.
Yeah, the role of growth also. Yeah, of course, in the reorganizing society, governments and regulation is necessary. But I mean, there are a lot of factors in that change that is necessary. So we need bottom up, we need top down. It's a dynamic interplay. We also need more. Why we need more bottom up is also that we need more legitimacy and acceptance for top down policies. So if more people recognize the problem and find themselves, for example, locked in certain habits and need help, they express legitimacy maybe for more top-down intervention. So the role of government is extremely important, of course, and other institutions. And growth is the system we have is reliant on growth. So obviously this is a huge barrier, so to say, of like capitalism and the ideology of growth. It's very difficult for policy and politicians to say that we need degrowth. In Sweden, at least, it doesn't happen. They always speak of economic growth, and that will not, sooner or later, they will have to stop that rhetoric because it doesn't work.
I also have one question at least. Well, you are along with us from the very beginning, and you know that we are a little bit obsessed with this question: what can we do? And especially, what can we do also in our role of scholars? Of course, writing book as yours is very important. We also had the first seminar of this semester was about waste, it was about public sociology. But so, I mean, we are digging in this with these three presentations. We have dig into this question, what could we also do as a scholar? What can we do we have? Because I see a lot of, for example, engineers that are actually there on the ground finding solution, experimenting solution. Actually, natural scientists seems much more caring about this issue than social scientists. So I wonder if you have the same feeling, and also if you have suggestion for us. I mean, what can we do? For example, with my group of research, we are actually working with the local municipality in order, I mean, to recognize the efforts that front runner are trying to do, but also recognizing that they cannot do anything if we don't act and change, to try to change also the environment where we, I mean, to make the environment more comfortable, to make sustainable consumption more practicable. So our work with the municipality goes in this direction. I'm finding a rule as a social scientist also to try to change the materiality of consumption. So I would like to know something about what you think.
I think that's exactly what one can do working with municipalities. I also do that. One thing I do is to talk about the same thing that I talked about for you. As I'm talking about these matters to not just academians, but also in popular dialogue. Having seminars, also interactive seminars, I think is important, so that people can express things. So I have done that a lot in Sweden, and particularly in my region where I work. But I also think it's important to work on discuss possible solutions. I mean, as you're into particularly the local level, I think is interesting. And one project I have is about sharing, and I mean not just using apps and like that, but in non-commercial sharing, and seeing how things like that can be scaled up in society. So discussing with civil society and municipalities about alternatives. I think that is a way ahead, not just municipalities, could be other actors, of course, also. But we need to be out there in society and talk and explore and try out and experiment. That's very, very important, I think. Also the students, of course, teaching and not just talking, but I mean, talking with them and having and not although we need to speak about the need for radical change, it's important also not to trivialize efforts. So to me, because we need to see this change process as stepwise. So I mean, whatever people are trying, so kind of encouraging these efforts. Sometimes I'm a bit critical towards critical literature, but because they only criticize, so to say. And this, my own book, might be too criticizing, but I think it's very important to work on the potentiality of change, both on the micro.
That's the problem, that sometimes, at least from our experience, I mean, people judge, I mean, other scholars judge you that you are doing more advocacy work rather than science. This also this limit, no? That is, I cannot understand how to cross-cut without being accused not to be scientific. No?
Exactly. There is that dilemma. I think it's not easy to get to where to be on that balance, but this is something I think you need to reflect on. I reflect on that a lot, where how much advocacy is possible to and still keep the legitimacy of being a social scientist. It's not so easy, but the answer is not just to stay in the university. I mean, you have to engage. And sometimes I think, you mentioned natural science and technology, it's like, I mean, I sometimes get the impression that others are doing collaboration with society and think that is neutral somehow, not political. And that is kind of absurd way too. So I think that there are always these ambiguities, but we have to be there.
Stefan as well, I don't know, what is it? Here, Stefan Axon has written something in the chat. I don't know if you want to say loudly, Stefan. But otherwise, Magnus can read.
Yes, I was just about to say that you touch upon quite a lot of like the social relations and the practices within your book, particularly as it relates to within the home, for example, which I found to be quite fascinating. And I was going to say that given kind of like, you know, COVID, quite a lot of those kind of relations and practices within and around the home have changed. I was just wondering, you know, whether you could touch on what you think are some of like those changes, how they've evolved and become reassembled, and what are some of the future research trajectories you think are, you know, are worth exploring in that area? Because that's something that I'm working on at the moment, and I find it quite fascinating to see how some of these practices have changed.
Can you be more precise? What practices are you
So I'm
changed?
kind of thinking like, you know, things like working from home and energy, that kind of, you know, those kind of practices, and, you know, changes in terms of like transport and the way that people view their home life and consumption. That's kind of like what I'm kind of thinking of, like what you think of that kind of like area.
Yeah, it's a very interesting area. And we just had this pandemic, so we can just speculate about what it will happen, and that is perhaps what I do in the book. I think that there are promises there to travel less, mobility that will have promising from a climate change point of view. But I also warn about these various things in the chapter that it can be also lead to, it's also a driver for new kinds of consumption. If every individual person should have more of everything to be able to have a full life at home at the same time as you are expect to have things at the office and etc. So it's but we just have to follow these ongoing changes, which are important, I think, for this where consumerism is going. I'm not sure. Now I just talk. So.
No, thank you very much for your response there. Very, very wonderful. Thank you very much for talking.
There was Sarah.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Magnus. I had many opportunities to talk to you about this book, but now I have a question. And it's about, you know, when we are reading your book, and also you mentioned here that you are aware of the macro structures, and also, you know, the rule of capitalism and also bigger systems, which is also obvious in the book. But my question is a little bit bigger. I mean, maybe it is not exactly about the book, but I am interested to know, what do you think about this? That you mentioned some concepts like extended self and also seeking identity through materials. But I wonder, what do you think that why we ended up in this situation? Why we as human beings, we like to extend ourselves through materials? Or why we think that, okay, multicultural capital is better than other kind of capitals? I don't know if you have something to say.
Yeah, it's almost philosophical question why we end up. I guess it is a combination of the factors that I discuss in the book, and of course the macro factors, the historical factors, the historical drivers of the list that I have on capitalism and industrialism, and I mean the creativity of the humanity is a factor here. What we can do, but it has become problematic. It's a negative consequence of our capacity overall. So yeah, it's a big, it's very big question. My answer would be that, okay, I think there's a combination of all these, and our capacity as human being has made us here, and it is becoming deeply problematic for us, this point of history.
Thank you.
Maybe we can have, because at least we can reflect, and we are creative, and we know we can reflect upon our needs, for example, we can reflect how we feel, etc. Perhaps we need to activate this potentiality, but it won't be easy.
Yeah, exactly. And I was thinking maybe this is also it can be also the fault of capitalism and that system, that we work more on that part of our character, human beings' character, to motivate us, or to I mean to trigger that part of our character, or our I don't know, maybe it is this is also something that comes from somewhere else, that the media, socialization, these kinds of things are more focused on that part rather than other aspects that human beings can develop.
In the reorganizing society, I think we have to. We cannot do other things in the short term or middle short term to use the institutions we have. But we also, me and Rolf is writing about that with the institutions in our other books that comes in a day, or actually exist, but from today. But so we are writing about institutions a bit in the final chapter. So some institutions need to be replaced, other institutions need to be reformed, and still other institutions need to, be as they are almost. So I think that is a parallel process, and there are different timescales involved also. And capitalism is the difficult one to respond to. I kind of believe that it has to fundamentally change because it's so fundamentally unsustainable. But in the very short term, how can we do that? I mean, we cannot end it today and tomorrow is another world. That doesn't happen. So in that sense, capitalists also have to change in the reformistic sense. So, but 200 years from now, I don't think it's possible to that capitalism continue, because then everything is burned out.
Here in Italy, a few years ago, I read a book that really surprised me with this idea that the title is Homo Comfort. And actually he explained the answer to the question, Sarah's question, say that we want to get rid of fatigue. I mean, I don't know, I really like this idea, because, for example, when I do research on my little groups that trying to buy local food, they do a lot of much more fatigue. Or just think about organic farmer, they do much more fatigue. Or just think about if you want to avoid to take the plane, you might want to take the train, as I started to do much more than before, but then I do a lot of much more fatigue. So this idea of Homo Comfort, the fact that humanity wants to get rid of this work with the body. It was very nice that the first cover of this book was a remote control, no? Because really, I mean, it seems to me that we want to get rid of this fatigue, I mean, being Homo Comfort. And the way to get back, I mean, not to get back, to get back, to go forward, we need more fatigue. And this is exactly what we don't want to do, at least in my...
Interesting, yeah.
So was not capitalism, but was that we want to get out from these efforts, I mean.
But effort is, if you look at Marx, for example, effort is what we need.
And anyway, it's not even, as you said, it's not even that we don't do any. I mean, the effort we do is more mental, probably now than physical.
Yeah.
But the fact when you quoted Rosa, you work with the Rosa theory, it's true that, I mean, we are constantly running. So at the end of the day, we are much more tired probably than if we
yes.
day, maybe. I mean,
I think it's important with time, and that I think one part of the puzzle is that the public feel that they have more time, but how to do that, and time need to be filled with something, and that could be creativity rather than consuming. It could be alternative activities. It could be socializing without consumerism. It could be a lot of other things to fill the time with, creating things rather than consuming things, for example. So time is an issue. Work, cutting the work week reductions and things like that.
well, excellent. I don't know if there are other question or issue that you want to discuss. We have, if we need, other 5 minutes. Otherwise, we can thank Magnus again very much, and we wish to all of you a very nice summer break, and we hope to see all of you again in October, November, probably November, when we will start. It was excellent. We knew that was a good end of the semester with your presentation and talk. Many thanks, and ciao.
Thank you a lot, everyone.
See you soon.